When Kang Taejin's triplets first said, "Dad," they were talking about someone else. 3 years after he made their pregnant mother bow to his own mother on the polished floor of a mansion in Seoul, Taejin stood in the white hallway of Seoul Family Court, holding a DNA report with his name on all 3 pages. A little boy with the same eyes as his hid behind a quiet man in a gray coat and whispered, "Appa? Is he the one Grandma warned us about?" The most feared mafia boss in Gangbook had broken up rival gangs, bribed judges, covered up scandals, and made ministers wait outside his office. But nothing in his violent upbringing had prepared him for 3 kids who were related to him, but he didn't trust them. For more stories like this, sign up for Korean Mafia Boss, because the real question was never if those kids were his. The question that broke up his empire was much worse than that. What does a man do when the family he can prove is his blood has already chosen someone else out of love? Taejin could barely hear his own breathing when the court clerk called Han So-eun's name. The hallway smelt like paper, coffee, wet wool, and that cold detergent that public buildings always use in the winter. So-eun stood at the end of it, in a dark coat, one hand on the shoulder of the smallest girl. She looked calm, as if she had been waiting for this crash for years. She didn't move when she saw him. She didn't shake. She didn't seem happy. The man next to her, Lee Jun-ho, was quiet. He bent down and tied the scarf around the boy's neck with a practiced hand. The kids leaned toward him without even thinking. That was the kind of closeness that no law could make. And if you think Taejin's punishment started there, you haven't seen the day he showed his wife how little safety his name could buy her. 3 years ago, the Kong mansion was so quiet that you could hear silk breathe. The house was on a hill above Hanam-dong, and it was all black stone, winter pines, and old money pretending to be calm. Portraits of ancestors watched every door from inside. The family shrine had bronze incense bowls that shone. The servants walked with their heads down. On the morning of Taejin's grandfather's memorial service, the women wore muted colors, and the men wore dark suits. Everyone knew their rank before they knew how to feel comfortable. They served meals by age, greeted people by status, and poured tea with both hands. In that house, respect was not the same as kindness. It was obedience that made things look nice. Han So-eun knew the rules. She had grown up in a prosecutor's house where how you stood, what you said, and when you said it all mattered. But rules and shame were not the same thing. By the 7th month of a hard pregnancy, she had stopped pretending she couldn't tell the difference. She moved slowly that morning, with one hand under the curve of her stomach. The twins, no, the doctors had just told her there were 3, pressed under her ribs like stubborn stars. She wore a simple, elegant, pale cream hanbok that had been adjusted for her pregnancy. No heavy stitching, no gems. She had never tried to get ahead of the Kang family's version of power. She had only tried to stay alive near it. Madame Kang Hyunju sat at the head of the low ceremonial table and looked at her with eyes that never wasted warmth. She was as calm as women who had ruled through their sons for so long that they didn't need to shout anymore. Her hair was pinned up just right. Her stance could have broken glass. Beside her was Jang Mira, the daughter of a shipping tycoon. She wore a fitted black dress and a smile of sympathy that looked like it cost a lot. That was all So-eun needed to know. Mira was not a member of the family. There was no reason for her to sit near the shrine, unless Madame Kang wanted her to be one. Taejin came in late because he was on the phone. He was wearing a black coat over a charcoal suit, and the snow was melting at his shoulders. When he walked in, the room changed. The men stopped talking. Servants looked down even more. Madame Kang's face even changed a little bit. Not softer, just more precise. He looked the same as always, calm, clean, and dangerous in the way that expensive knives are dangerous, quiet until they are used. His eyes stopped on So-eun's face, just for a moment. That used to be enough to calm her down. Not anymore. The memorial went on in the same way that hierarchies have always worked. Give in to the dead, give food, fill the glass with wine. Keep in mind the line you belong to. But halfway through the meal, when Mira tried to touch So-eun's stomach and call the babies our future heirs, Madame Kang put down her chopsticks so quietly that the room went quiet. "Get up," she said. So-eun looked at her and then carefully got up. "You have forgotten to be thankful." The older men at the table looked at their bowls. Mira's lashes fell. Taejin didn't say anything. So-eun said in a low, respectful voice, "I didn't forget to be thankful. I forgot to let a stranger take my kids." Madame Kang's eyes got hard. "Those kids are part of the Kang bloodline before they are part of your feelings." A line like that doesn't cut all at once. It cuts slowly. The woman comes first. Next, the room. Then, the future. So-eun felt all of them. She said, "With all due respect, they are not property." As a protected wife, that was the last honest thing she could say. Madame Kang got up. "Then bow and say you're sorry." The room stopped moving. In that situation, a formal bow was not just polite, not with a daughter-in-law who is pregnant, not in front of heirs, staff, allies, and a woman like Mira who was close enough to enjoy it. It was a lesson, a correction in public, a statement that the body giving birth in front of them was still lower than the hand that controlled the table. So-eun looked at Taejin, not to protect her pride. That was already starting to die. To find out if her husband knew the difference between being loyal and being a coward. He got it. He just made the wrong choice. "Mom," he said softly, "the guests are here." She didn't look at him, Madame Kang. "Then show them what respect looks like." The silence grew deeper. A wind chime hit a stone outside once. So-eun felt one of the babies move hard under her ribs. Fear made her breath quicken. Not for her. For them. She said, "Taejin," and it was the first time in months that she had let his name sound like a plea. He walked across the room. For one horrible second, she thought he had come to stand next to her. Instead, he stopped in front of her so that only she could hear him. "Do it," he said softly. "I'll take care of the rest later." That's how some men hurt the women they say they love. Not by yelling, not with a show, with a quiet order that sounded like a plan. "I'll take care of the rest later." Like dignity was a vase that broke at dinner instead of the backbone of a life. So-eun stared at him until the room disappeared. The holy place, the visitors, Mira, Ms. Kang, the help. At that moment, none of them mattered. The only thing that mattered was that the father of her children had decided that his mother's comfort was more important than her humanity. Then she bent down. Her knees hit the lacquered floor first. The room smelt like pine oil and incense ash. The babies moved again. Pain shot up her back. Her hands flattened. As she bowed her head toward the polished wood, the house watched in respectful silence. She saw Mira smile into her cup out of the corner of her eye. At that moment, So-eun stopped being Taejin's wife in every way that mattered. Afterward, he helped her stand. That was the meanest part. His hand was on her elbow. His fingers were soft now, as if being kind after being humiliated was enough to fix things. She didn't pull away. She just looked at him with a stillness that he would remember for years every time he walked into an empty room. Tajin found her in the nursery wing his staff had been getting ready that night, after the guests had gone home and the snow started to fall heavily on the courtyard stones. There were 3 cribs that weren't finished yet, and they were in warm light. Blankets that had been folded sat there unopened. In the heat, a mobile of paper cranes slowly turned. He shut the door behind him. "I told you I'd fix it." So-eun kept her back to the window. "No." He looked unhappy. "No what?" "No, you won't." The room was soft, like things made for babies. It made his coldness seem almost wrong. "It was just one moment," he said. "If I had called her out there, in front of the shareholders and elders, it would have made things worse." Then she turned around, and if anger had been on her face, he might have been able to fight it off. But there was no rage, just clarity. She said, "You think the room was the problem. You were the problem." Tension was high. My back was on the floor. I kept the family safe. She chuckled softly. "Exactly." He looked at her, his jaw tightening. Men like Tajin were made to deal with gunfire, police raids, betrayal, and blood. Not truths said without shaking. "She is my mum." So-eun said, "And you are a husband. You chose which title was more important today." He didn't know how to respond, so he did what powerful men often do when they feel trapped by their morals. He went back to logistics. He said, "I'll move us to the East residence for a while." "You won't have to see her." So-eun looked at the 3 beds. "You still think distance is the wound." He moved closer. "Then tell me what you want." She looked him in the eye. "I want to know that you will stand in front of our kids if your mother comes for them, not step aside and say you're sorry later." Then something changed in his face. Not soft, fear. Not afraid of danger. He was afraid of how much that kind of bravery would cost him. He didn't say anything, and that silence told her everything she needed to know. You know what she understood that night if you're already doing the maths. A man who can't protect your dignity before your kids are born will ask your kids to forgive him for what he did instead. The next wound came without a sound. 2 days later, So-eun got up before dawn and walked across the upper hallway to get water. The only light in the mansion came from Madame Kang's sitting room. First, she heard Mira's voice, and then Madame Kang's. Mira said, "The registry must be controlled before birth." "They won't be raised by her feelings," Madame Kang said. "The queue gets more complicated if there are boys. The optics still matter if there are girls. In either case, she is only temporary." So-eun stopped breathing. Madame Kang went on, calm and practical. "After the birth, the children can stay with the family. She can get better in another country, in a quiet way. These things are set up." "And Tajin," the older woman said, "he will resent it. Then he will get it." The babies kicked so hard that So-eun put a hand on the wall. For a short time, "Get better abroad." Kids who are part of the family. The language of stealing always comes in the form of procedure. She went back to her room without making a sound. She didn't yell. She didn't pack. Not yet. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed until dawn and watched the first light of winter crawl over the paper doors. For the first time since marrying Kang Taejin, she let herself think a thought she had thought was betrayal. She couldn't be safe with his power. It could only get to her. She tried again later that afternoon. Taejin was at his desk in his office with 3 phones, a city map lit up on the wall, and 2 lieutenants waiting outside. A fight over a warehouse in Incheon had turned violent. People were paying customs officers. A crew that was his enemy had set up shop near one of his ports. The whole machine of his empire was buzzing with danger. So-eun went in anyway. He looked up right away. That used to mean something to her, too. "I heard your mum," she said. "She wants to keep me away from the babies after they are born." He leaned back a little and squinted his eyes. "When?" "Before dawn." Mira was there with her. When Mira's name came up, his face darkened, but the phones kept vibrating on the desk. That small detail told her everything before he said anything. He said, "I'll take care of it." "When?" "As soon as I shut this." "No." Her voice stayed calm. "Not later. Now." He stood up. "I can't shut down the whole operation just because my mum said something in a private room." So-eun's face went blank. "Not because she said something, because she meant it. I said I would take care of it." "You said that before I bowed." The line hit harder than a slap. He could feel it. She saw him feel it. But then one of the phones rang again. Instead of walking around the desk to get to her, he chose to answer the call instead of worrying about his schedule. That was when she stopped asking. She was gone by evening. No big escape, no music crash, no sprinting through city traffic in the rain. Just accuracy. A black maternity coat that isn't in the closet. Her wedding ring was in the top drawer of the nursery dresser. Next to it was an ultrasound picture of 3 small bodies huddled together in blurry light, and a folded note with handwriting so steady that it scared him more than panic ever could. "You kept the family name safe. I will keep the kids safe from it." Taejin ripped half of Seoul apart to find her. He looked at airports, ports, private clinics, safe houses, and even his own rival networks. He had people working at customs, people who work in hospitals, people who could find a man even after he changed his face. But So-eun disappeared, as if she had slipped between the cracks in the city. Madame Kang said she didn't know, with perfect calm. Mira said she was worried at just the right time. 3 weeks later, a senior obstetrician from one of the Kang family clinics quietly told Taejin that Han So-eun had had serious problems and lost the baby before disappearing to get better. He didn't believe it. Then he did it. After that, he hated himself for believing it. The lie worked because it made him feel guilty. It didn't take much imagination to see how stress could affect a body that was already carrying 3 kids, like when a man made his pregnant wife kneel. So he worked a lot. That's another way for men to mourn what they broke. They get better at what they do. More feared, more precise. Taejin added more roots, took over competitors, bought silence, built new fronts, and made the name Kang more well-known throughout Seoul. People talked about him in boardrooms and back alleys with the same careful tone by the time he was 34. But sometimes, in the darkest hour before dawn, he would walk by the locked nursery and stand there, listening to nothing. No tears, no songs to sleep to, no tiny steps. The sound of the central heating and the peace he had earned. 3 years later, his dad passed away. That made everything different. The official story was that it was a stroke. The unofficial story was what always happens when a father dies in a rich and violent family. Inventories, hidden accounts, disputed signatures, and legacy wars that look like mourning. The elders came. Lawyers got better at what they do. Cousins suddenly thought of blood. Madame Kang held on to the family structure with the cold skill of a general. Then, during an audit of the inheritance, a sealed file came to light. 3 birth certificates. 3 children were born in a provincial clinic with limited registration 18 months after So-eun went missing. Madam Kang had once paid to bury Kang Taejin's paternity markers, but now she chose to dig them up. Why now? Because heirs were suddenly helpful. Because dead husbands make boards that are hungry. Women like Madam Kang never give up their power. They put it in a jar, keep it safe, use it when the weather changes. Taejin read the file one time, again. Then he drove to his mother's house without a driver, an escort, or even calling ahead. This is how the family knew he was really dangerous. Madam Kang welcomed him into her private tea room as if she had been expecting him. There was steam between them. The porcelain shone. Her hands were steady. He said, "You knew." She didn't insult him by acting like she did. "I had a feeling," I later confirmed. "And you didn't say anything. You were not stable then." He laughed once in a low, horrible way. "So you took 3 years. I kept the family out of trouble. You kept your control." Her eyes got sharper. "Don't make this sound romantic. She was never going to raise Kang heirs that I couldn't reach." Madam Kang looked directly at the son she had raised for the first time as an adult. She saw not obedience or usefulness, but judgment. He said, "You are going to withdraw the petition." "No." The word fell with the calm of a surgeon. "The board already knows there are kids. If they don't join the registry, their competitors will take advantage of it. Under my watch, the matter is under control." "Under your watch?" "Yes." He slowly straightened up. "You will never get close to them again. You still think you're a dad because of biology." That one hurt because it was true enough to hurt. Madam Kang saw it and pushed harder. "The woman left you. The kids don't know you. The man with them, Jun-ho, has taken over the job you left. Your gut will make this worse. Mine will make it easier." And there it was. The poison that has been in the house the longest. Not anger, disguised contempt as intelligence. Taejin left without breaking anything. That was important. 3 years ago, he would have used violence to get rid of pain. Now the damage was too fragile for that. He froze 3 accounts that he could use at his own discretion that were linked to his mother's legal team. He got the metadata on the petition filing. He gave family court review to his cleanest outside lawyer, not his criminal network. He said that So-eun should not be able to talk to him unless it was through lawyers. No watching the kids. Don't worry. No presents. No threats. He was learning too late that fear could not be the way to get better if it had caused the loss. Then there was the hallway of the court. Then the whisper came. "Is he the one Grandma told us to stay away from, Appa?" "Heard it, Jun-ho." So-eun heard it. It was heard by Taejin. The boy's fingers dug into Jun-ho's coat. The smallest girl, who was sleepy and had round cheeks and a yellow knit hat, looked up at Taejin with pure, unfiltered suspicion. The third child, a girl with So-eun's eyes and Taejin's stubborn chin, stood half a step in front of her siblings with the fierce seriousness that only eldest daughters and future commanders have. "Don't talk to my brother," she said. No bullet had ever gone into Taejin that easily. The judge was practical in the courtroom. Terms of temporary protection. No change of guardianship. No media coverage. Biological paternity is acknowledged, but custody rights are not yet attached. Existing daily care plans will stay in place until they are reviewed. When Taejin's lawyer started to object, Taejin stopped him with just one look. He was finally starting to understand that not every fight was worth winning. He waited outside until the clerk took the kids inside and Jun-ho came back to do the paperwork. So-eun stood by the window and looked out at the gray river and the cars slowly moving along the bridge. Tajin stopped a few feet away. You knew I thought they were gone. Yes. His jaw moved. You could have told me. She didn't look at him. She looked at the river. Could I? He didn't have a clear answer. She gave him the truth he had worked for. She said, "The night I heard your mother decide my future, I knew that if I stayed, my children would grow up in a house where love was conditional and respect was fake. You would have found me if I told you where I was. You would have brought your power with you if you had found me before you changed. And your strength was the threat." The words didn't come out clearly. That made things worse. He said in a low voice, "The kids call him Dad." Yes. Why? Finally, she turned to him. Because he was there when my water broke at 32 weeks. He was there when one baby stopped breathing for 14 seconds. He was there when we couldn't afford a private room. He was there when Min Seo had night terrors, when Ha-jun wouldn't talk for 2 months, when Ji-yu got sick in the winter and only slept upright against a chest that smelt like eucalyptus and laundry soap. Her face stayed calm, but the force behind it could have leveled cities. Fatherhood is not a job title. It's the same thing over and over. He was the first to look away. That was also new. What he didn't tell her then was that every word he said had a picture in his head. And in every picture, he wasn't there. Access was limited to a room with cartoon clouds on the walls. The child therapist's office in Seodaemun had a low bookshelf, a carpet with roads and animals on it, and chairs that were too small for adults to sit in. So Ayun's conditions were medical. For 1 hour, under supervision. There is no mention of custody. No making people touch each other. He couldn't call himself dad unless the kids did first. No gifts other than approved books. He left if any child asked him to. Junho went to the first session but stayed in the observation room, which had one-way glass. Not because he didn't believe So-eun, because the kids did. Ha-jun was the closest to the door. Min Seo openly studied Taijin, who was suspicious and smart. Ji-yu hid behind a stuffed rabbit that was almost as big as her body. Taijin sat in the smallest chair and did the hardest thing any man like him could do. He shrank himself. He said, "I brought books." No one said anything. He put them on the floor. One about trains, one about the stars. One is about tigers in Korean stories. Min Seo turned her head. "How do you know what we want?" I asked. "Who?" He almost said, "Your mum." He didn't want So-hun to be blamed for working together. He said, "The therapist." That was enough truth to get through the moment. Ji-yu reached for the tiger book, but then stopped. Ha-jun picked it up first, flipped through 3 pages, and then put it back down with a serious look on his face. "Too many words," he said. Taijin almost smiled, for some reason he couldn't explain. The therapist threw a ball at the group. Min Seo got it. "Mom says it's okay to let strangers in slowly." Taijin nodded once. "That sounds smart." She told him, "It means you're on level 1. There it was. Limited access. Kids say things that adults spend years trying to hide. "What does level 1 mean?" he asked. "We're watching you," it means. He bowed his head a little, showing respect at a height that no elder in his mansion had ever earned more. "Then watch me." That first visit went off without a hitch, which is a sign of grace in families like theirs. Ji-yu dropped her mitten on the way out. Taijin bent down to get it, but before he touched her hand, he held out the mitten instead. She looked at him, then at the mitten, and then she took it. A small thing. A thing that isn't. But if you've ever had to work to get back the right to be harmless, you know how big a mitten can get. 6 days later, the leak happened. A tabloid blog posted fuzzy pictures of So-eun going into the therapist's building with the triplets, and a headline that hinted at a scandal involving a secret heir and a big logistics family. No names. Not yet. But in Seoul, names spread faster than print. By the afternoon, a camera crew had made it to the preschool where the kids went to school near Jun-ho's house. For the first time in 3 years, So-eun called Taejin. He picked up before the second ring. She said, "There are reporters outside the school." "I know." "Did you?" "No." His voice became hard and businesslike. "Pay close attention. 2 cars are already changing lanes near the side entrance. The principal has been told to keep the kids in school for 20 minutes. A private lawsuit is being filed against the blog and 3 of its affiliate accounts. No one from my company will talk to the kids directly. In 90 seconds, Jun-ho will get the new exit route." There was a short pause. Not soft, amazed. "Why does Jun-ho get it?" she asked. "Because if I send it to you and someone is watching your phone, you become the target. Sending it to him as the registered guardian contact makes the move look like a normal one." That was the first time she heard what his intelligence sounded like when it finally got pointed in the right way. The video was gone from 2 platforms within an hour. By the end of the day, metadata had linked the leak to a consultant who worked for Jang Mira's public relations firm. Taejin did not break into Mira's office. He didn't threaten her in a parking garage. He had her contracts checked, her shell company exposed to tax investigators, and her access to the Kang Family Memorial Foundation taken away in a way that made it seem like a clerical mistake. He hung up after 1 sentence when Mira called and yelled, "You thought my silence meant yes." 2 weeks later, in a kindergarten auditorium with crooked paper suns on the walls, the trial upgrade took place. The kids sang a spring song. So-eun let Taejin go as long as he sat in the back, came alone, and left if any child started to cry. Jun-ho was already there, kneeling down to tie Hajun's shoes. Minseo said her line over and over again. Ji-yu held both adults' hands until the teacher told her to come inside. Taejin sat in the back row and watched a life he hadn't made happen under cheap stage lights and hand-painted cardboard clouds. No empire can outshine these scenes. Minseo forgot half of what she wanted to say and made up silly things. Hajun sang 3 beats late and then twice as loud to make up for it. Ji-yu saw Jun-ho in the crowd, waved off the beat, and smiled so hard that she forgot the rest of the song. The kids ran to So-eun first after the show was over, then to Jun-ho. Taejin stayed right where he said he would stay. Hajun was the one who came up to him. Not close, not completely. Just 3 small steps in dress shoes. The boy said, "You were quiet." Taejin nodded. "I said I would be." Hajun thought about that. Most grown-ups lie. Taejin looked at the small face that looked so much like his own that for a moment it felt like he was talking to a version of himself that hadn't been affected by power. "I know." The boy held out a folded paper sun with glue that wasn't straight on the edges. Teacher gave more. He didn't say it was for Taejin. He didn't have to. Taejin took it with both hands. Another thing that doesn't matter. A different universe. What would you do if you were So-eun? Let the man who let you down stand at the edge of your children's lives and slowly prove himself. Or close the door before his power makes them as afraid as it made you. That question was like an unwritten verdict that hung over all of them. Fever was the first sign of inner life access. In the early spring, Jiyu got a respiratory infection. Not a disaster, but enough to make So-eun's body panic again. There were a lot of people in the clinic's waiting area. The rain hit the windows. Jiyu whined against her mother's shoulder, feeling hot and miserable. Ha-jun walked back and forth. Min-seo asked for 3 answers that didn't make sense in 30 seconds. Junho was stuck in surgery on the other side of town. The only reason Taejin knew about the emergency was because one of his quietly assigned legal aides overheard a hospital administrator asking for press management after recognizing the family name on the sealed birth records. He came without security, without a coat, and with rain in his hair. He stopped 3 feet away. "Let me know what you need." Not what happened, not the reason she didn't call. "What do you need?" So-eun looked up, tired enough to tell the truth. "The line at the pharmacy is 40 minutes long. Ha-jun won't sit down. Min-seo hasn't had anything to eat. My mother-in-law will use a picture of Jiyu in this state in court if she gets one." Taejin acted right away. He bought time with skill. A private side room, not because he was scared, but because he had asked for privacy in a legal way, and the hospital director had backed him up. For the 2 older ones, warm rice porridge and triangle kimbap, a humidifier from the children's wing. There were no visible guards at either exit, just plainclothes watchers whose faces never turned toward the kids. He sat down on the floor of the waiting room and made a chain of paper cranes out of pharmacy receipts, while Ha-jun finally sat down. Min-seo, who wasn't sure but was hungry, ate half of the kimbap and watched him like a prosecutor. When Junho got there, he was wet and out of breath from surgery. The storm was still going on. He looked at Jiyu first, then So-eun, and finally Taejin. No anger over land, no cheap male showboating, just a long look at what had been done. "Thanks," Junho said. Taejin nodded once. "Her fever has gone down by 2 points." Junho went to Jiyu and checked on her gently. "You knew to keep her standing." Taejin's eyes moved once toward So-eun. "I asked her what she needed." Junho knew what the sentence meant. He seemed to think it was good. Keep on learning. After the kids finally fell asleep in So-eun's flat that night, with the sound of the air purifier and the soft glow of a nightlight from a cartoon, she went outside to get some fresh air. Beyond the apartment buildings, Seoul sparkled with neon lights, exhaust, and windows that wouldn't stay still. Taejin was already there, not too close to her, with his hands on the railing. She said, "I didn't ask you to come up." "I know. Then what are you doing here?" "I would leave now, because I would have been useful once, and expect credit for it." She almost smiled. Not quite. At that point, access to inner life opened by 1 inch. Not because she let him go, because she saw that he had stopped asking for help. "Do you want to know why they call Junho Dad?" she asked. He didn't move. "Yes. The first night after they were born, I bled." She looked out over the city as if it would be easier to aim the words at lights than at a face. It was raining. There weren't enough staff at the clinic. One of the incubators broke. I thought I would die before I found out who had my son's cry and who had my temper. With one hand, Junho held the pressure and called 3 hospitals with the other. He fought, signed, drove, carried, and stayed. He was always there when I woke up scared. Taejin's throat got tight. "So, when Ha-jun learned to talk," she went on, "he pointed to the man who tied his shoes, cleaned his bottles, sang off-key, and never made him feel like a burden. He called him what kids call safety." The cars on the street below hissed as they drove through the rain. Finally, Taejin spoke. "Do you know the worst part?" She stayed. I used to think that power meant no one could take from me. His voice didn't have any of its usual strength now. But the truth is worse. I let my mum train me so well that I helped her take from me when it was important. That was the truth. Not finished. Not planned. Ugly enough to be real. He swallowed once. I thought I was stopping a war when I told you to bow. What I was really doing was showing that I was still a son who was too scared to get married. So Owen shut her eyes for a moment. Some apologies ask for a reward. This one didn't. He said, I can't give you back those years. I already know that. I can't even ask for them. But if I can make money in any part of their lives, I will do it at the speed that keeps them safe, not at the speed that makes me comfortable. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, in a low voice, if you ever use the law to take them away from the man who raised them, any trust that is growing will die that day. He didn't hesitate to answer. I won't. She believed the first promise because it cost him something. The next attack came from where all the polite families hide their cruelty, the law. Madam Kang filed an emergency petition saying that So Eun's unstable housing, media exposure, and hidden parentage put the children's long-term well-being at risk. There were photos from the clinic leak, some chosen shots of the school gate, and an affidavit from a former household worker saying that So Eun was emotionally volatile during her pregnancy. Mira came back through other people. A group on the board that was close to Taejin's late father suggested that the triplets should be put under formal Kang guardianship to protect the inheritance structures. An anonymous document led the prosecutor's office to reopen questions about several shell companies that could link Taejin to the children in a way that would be bad for his reputation. Clever pressure, legal pressure, pressure in optics, pressure from bloodlines, the kind that can't be fixed by hitting someone in the mouth. So Taejin acted like a strategist instead of a dictator. He used emergency divestment to separate his legitimate businesses from the ones that were contaminated. He put the kids' possible inheritance into an education trust that was run by someone else and no Kang elder could touch. He found the former household worker and showed her pay stubs that proved Madam Kang's office had been paying her long after she quit. He met with the prosecutor in private and gave them records that showed a rival cousin's offshore fraud. He didn't do this to get mercy, but to point the truth toward the real rot. Most importantly, he burnt the draft custody claim that his own lawyer wrote to give him more power. In a literal sense, he put it in the fireplace in his study and watched the pages turn black. Junho saw the copy later in the legal folder that said, "Withdrawn before filing." That changed things between them. The two men finally met alone at a rooftop cafe above a hospital annex. It was all concrete planters and bright spring light. Junho came in wearing scrubs and a navy coat. Taejin came alone. Seoul lay below them, bright and uncaring. Taejin said, "You don't like me." Once, Junho stirred his coffee. "No. At least you're being honest. I don't have to like you to see that you're getting better." Taejin let out a low breath that could have turned into a laugh in a different life. "That sounds like So Eun." Junho looked straight at him. "Do you want to be a part of those kids' lives? Stop trying to beat me." Taejin's face became a little more serious. "That's easy for you to say." "No," Junho said. "I have to say." The wind blew through the planters. An ambulance siren rose and fell somewhere below. "They call me Dad because they picked a word for the person who came when they cried," Junho said. "That word is not a prize. It is a story. You will lose all of them if you make this about being replaced. Taejin looked out over the city. Then, what should I write about? Junho didn't answer right away. Becoming someone whose presence doesn't bother them. Rivalries can kill men. And there are rivalries that teach them things that their pride can't learn on its own. The full commitment test came on the anniversary of the bow. Madam Kang asked Taejin to come to the ancestral hall to talk about the terms of the settlement before the final hearing. The room was cruelly symmetrical, with memorial tablets, incense, a low lacquer table, and old portraits hanging above. The floor was the same smooth wood, the same way to build obedience. This time, though, Taejin already knew how much the room had cost him. Madam Kang sat alone in a formal hanbok, looking stern and unmovable. It was as if she had dressed in tradition to remind him of where authority began. "You can still end this cleanly," she said. He stayed standing. She pushed a folder across the table. Inside, a plan for a family settlement, public recognition of the children as Kang heirs under the matriarch's care. So Yoon will get a lot of money guarantees, a planned public meeting between Taejin and Mira to boost confidence in the market. So Eun only has limited rights to contact each year. Junho was completely erased. It was horrible. It was classy. Families like theirs called it practical. Madam Kang's eyes were on him. "Take this, and the kids will be safe. Get an education, leave a legacy, and be safe. If you don't accept it, the final hearing will be bad. I will look at your business history. I will question her decision. I will take that man out of their legal area. The board will back me up." Taejin only looked at the paper one more time before closing the folder. He said in a low voice, "There was a time when I would have thought this was strength." Her face didn't change. "And now?" "Now I know that it's fear written out in bullet points." Her voice got sharper for the first time in years. "Don't talk to me about fear. I taught you not to bend, and that's why everything you are is what it is." He looked her in the eye. "No. After I learned where you made me break, I built everything I am that deserves to live." The incense burnt between them, sending thin blue threads into the air. Then Taejin did something that no other Kang's son had done in that room. He bowed down, not to the tablets, not to his mum. He bowed toward the empty spot on the floor where So-eun had once knelt down because he told her to. His face had turned colder than anger when he stood up straight. "I made my pregnant wife kneel in this room," he said. "Before my children were even born, I let this family teach them that power was more important than care. You kept them from me when it was convenient for you, and then claimed them again when it was convenient for you. I owe this house blood, but it ends with me." Madam Kang stood up so quickly that her chair scraped the floor. "You would ruin your father's line for that woman." He shook his head once. "No, I would take away your access to it." That afternoon, before the elders and board members met to talk about the succession, Kang Taejin publicly stepped down from the running for chairman. He put the controlling votes in the family's clean companies into an irrevocable blind trust and named an outside fiduciary panel to handle any future inheritance tied to the triplets until they turned 18. No Kang relative would have any say in this. He set fire to his own bridge so that his mother couldn't cross it. The room blew up. Older people called it crazy. Cousins said it was weak. Mira said it was a betrayal. Mrs. Kang called it ungratefulness. The board called an emergency break. Taejin said it was Tuesday. And the move worked because power only cares about what happens, not how people feel. He gave up the throne, which took away the children's value as a bargaining chip. There was nothing left to grab but responsibility. There wasn't a gunfight at the climax. It happened in family court, where the lights were bright and the clock ticked too loudly. There were a lot of papers in front of the judge: the hidden records, the withdrawn custody draft, the media leak trail, the trust instruments, the therapist reports, the school statements, Jun-ho's guardianship history, So-eun's housing and financial records, and the strangest thing of all, Kang Tae-jin's own sworn statement asking the court to not give him daily custody. People could hear the clerk turning pages in the courtroom. When Tae-jin was called to the stand, he did not change the truth. He said, "I am their biological father. I am also the reason their mother thought my house was unsafe." It made sense for her to come to that conclusion. On the other side of the aisle, So-eun's lawyer stopped writing. Madam Kang's jaw locked up. Tae-jin kept going. "I don't want to change the lives of those kids. I want to have structured, supervised, and gradually earned access according to what their therapist suggested and what their mother agreed to." The judge leaned in a little. "You are giving up immediate custodial power." "Yes." "Why?" When he answered, he didn't look at his mother. "Because I already used power once when I needed to protect myself. I won't do it again." The decision was made after the break. So-eun still had primary custody. Jun-ho was recognized as a continuing psychological parent for stability purposes, with standing in educational and medical coordination. Tae-jin was allowed to visit the children on a graduated basis as long as it didn't bother Jun-ho's role. The children were comfortable, and the therapeutic guidelines were followed. The court threw out Madam Kang's petition with prejudice. She wasn't allowed to talk to the kids directly until a future review. In legal terms, it was terrible. In moral terms, it was the first honest structure any of them had ever been given. Cameras were waiting at the barricades outside the courthouse, but this time, no one from Tae-jin's side had told them where to go. They went out through the service hallway. Ha-jun was half asleep on Jun-ho's back. Min-seo took So-eun's hand. Ji-yu had a stuffed rabbit and kept looking at Tae-jin with serious interest. The smallest girl pulled on So-eun's sleeve as they got to the lift. She whispered to her mum, "Is he still level 1? But not quietly enough. So-eun turned to look at Tae-jin. There was a hint of humor in her eyes for the first time. "Not," she said. "He got through level 1. Min-seo put her arms across her chest. "Then he is level 2. Trial upgrade." Tae-jin knelt down to show that he was less afraid than they were. "Level 2 means what?" Ha-jun, who was still on Jun-ho's back, answered sleepily. "It means you can come over sometimes. If you do what you said you would do." And just like that, a kid with glue on his sleeve gave the Empire's most feared man the most important sentence of his life. "You can come over sometimes, if you keep your word." Anyone who has never had to rebuild trust from scratch should think that sounds small. It sounded bigger than inheritance to Tae-jin. Weeks went by, then months. He kept coming back, not very much, not perfectly, all the time. He learned that Min-seo hated raisins on principle when he went to the park for breakfast on Saturday. Ha-jun's speech therapy sessions picked up when he said that trucks were better than all cars except police cars. Pharmacy runs to get Ji-yu's cough syrup for the winter. Quietly talked to Jun-ho about school forms. No trying to get rid of. No trying to get ahead. There was no anger when the kids yelled, "Appa!" and meant someone else. He learned how they moved. Ha-jun hated wet socks and liked exact times. Minseo pushed every adult's limits because she had to find out which walls were real. Jiyu was the quickest to forgive and the most likely to remember. So-eun watched it all with the patience of a woman who had been through enough to stop thinking that hard work would change her. She didn't melt. She didn't hurry. She didn't give in to every good deed. She told Taejin he was wrong when he said command instead of care. She saw that he was listening. She made him sit in the discomfort of normal parenting instead of letting him buy solutions. That was the real learning, not the court, not in boardrooms. A Saturday in a kid's shoe store with 3 opinions, 1 missing sock, a sugar crash, and no bodyguard to put things back in order. After a long day of taking pictures at preschool, the 4 adults and 3 children ended up at a small restaurant near Bukchon one evening in late autumn. The owner knew Jun-ho, not Taejin, and without any trouble, he brought the kids extra side dishes. There was steam coming from bowls of seaweed soup. The windows got foggy. Jiyu fell asleep on So-eun's shoulder. Hajun arranged his spoon and chopsticks in a very serious way, like a soldier. Minseo said that kimchi was emotionally complicated. Taejin looked at the table. Not his table. The table is theirs. Warm, full of people, a little chaotic, and alive. Junho told Hajun that being brave and being loud were not the same thing. So-eun was cleaning Jiyu's cheek of rice. Minseo was trying to get one more mandu with the unyielding logic of a future lawyer. Taejin had thought for years that love was shown in big ways, like buying safety, getting rid of threats, and controlling outcomes. But here, in the cheap yellow light and the sound of normal dishes, he finally saw what he had gotten wrong. Love was work, small repeats, being there without a show. He had once been in charge by making everyone around him act like he was important. Now, the most important thing that had happened in his life was that a little girl let him fill her water glass without thinking about it. That year, winter hit hard. At dawn, the first snow fell. Taejin came to visit on Saturday with no gifts, just a bag of tangerines. So-eun had said that the kids liked peeling them together, so he brought them. It smelt like toast and laundry in the apartment. Hajun opened the door before the adults could and said in a very serious voice, "You are 4 minutes late." Taejin looked at his watch. Traffic. That's an excuse. It is also true. Minseo came up behind him. People at level 2 can still be demoted. Taejin said, "I'll be careful." Jiyu came in wearing only 1 sock and asked the question that made the room stop for a moment. "Can Mr. Kang come with us to see the snowman?" Not Dad, not Appa, not Dad. Mr. Kang, a title made up of distance and chance. Taejin didn't try to hide the hit. He just took what was offered. "If your mom says yes." So-eun looked at him, then at the kids, and finally at Jun-ho, who gave the smallest shrug in the world, which meant that he couldn't stop her from making this choice. "Yes," she said. They went to the courtyard behind the apartment buildings, where the kids in the neighborhood had already made lopsided kingdoms out of the first snow. Hajun wanted the stacking to be just right. Minseo wanted a scarf that was very dramatic. Jiyu wanted the snowman to have rabbit ears, but there was no reason for it. Taejin did what he had been taught to do. He did something to help. He didn't give Hajun a lecture when his mitten got wet, and he had to get a new one. Minseo fell, and he waited for her to say it was okay before brushing off her coat. Jiyu got tired halfway through the ears, and he only picked her up after she raised both arms. Junho stood across the courtyard with So-eun under the bare tree, his hands in his pockets, not getting involved. Do you wish you hadn't done it? Junho asked in a low voice. So-eun understood what he meant. Not going, not living. This, the slow opening. She saw Taejin kneel in the snow while Minseo changed the angle of the carrot nose with a lot of confidence. I wish he wasn't who he was, she said. I don't feel bad about making him pay for it. Junho nodded once. And now? So-eun breathed out white into the cold winter air. Now I let the kids choose what kind of future his actions deserve. That was the last truth, more than any court order. He didn't want the door to open again. It opened again because he stopped trying to make it. As the sun was setting, Hajun walked over to Taejin with a stick arm like a ceremonial gift. The snowman had fallen down twice and been rebuilt twice more. He said, "You can put this one." "Are you sure?" Hajun thought about the question very carefully. You came back a lot. It wasn't forgiveness. It was proof. And for a man who had once lived by bloodline, proof was finally enough. People in Seoul would still tell the story wrong years later. They would say that the Mafia boss lost everything because he put his mother ahead of his wife. They would say that another man was their dad. People would say he gave up the chairmanship, cut off ties with his family, and stood outside his children's lives like a ghost waiting for mercy. That would all be true, but not all of it. The real ending wasn't that he lost power. He had always been in charge. The real ending was that he learned that being powerful couldn't make a kid like you when they were scared. And once a man knows that, he either becomes dangerous in a new way, or he turns into a person. So-eun gave Taejin a folded list by the door on the last Saturday before the Lunar New Year. "What is this?" he asked. Hajun's schedule for the school festival, the date of Minseo's recital, Ji-Yu's next appointment. He slowly looked up. "Is this level 3? Did he ask. A small smile crossed her lips. Access to the inner life. Don't make me regret it. For the first time in years, something warm moved through his chest without hurting him more than it healed. He took the paper with both hands. Minseo yelled from the living room behind them. Level 4 is still very hard even if he passes level 3. Taejin turned to look at the noise. What is level 4? Ji-Yu spoke first, his voice full of power and authority. Test of full commitment. Junho put down the grocery bags in the kitchen and laughed quietly. So-eun crossed her arms and looked Taejin in the eye. She said, Kids have great systems. What's the test? He asked. Hajun was serious like a judge this time. He said, You keep picking us, even when it's not fun. No syndicate oath had ever asked for more. There had never been a board vote that was as important. 태진은 아이들을 보며 소은, 준호, 그리고 정규 입구로 향했다. 신발들이 엉망으로 쌓여 있었고 작은 스카프가 걸쇠에서 떨어져 있었다. 그는 마지막 시험이 이미 시작된 지 오래라고 생각했다. Not in front of a judge, not in the Hall of Ancestors, not when he gave up the throne. There, at the edge of a life built without him. He still went inside, not as a victor, not even as a man who has the right to stay. Finally, someone was willing to do the one thing love had asked of him from the beginning. Keep picking them. If you're wondering if the kids ever called him Dad, the answer is not simple, because healing is not easy. Some names come early, some come late.